And this is our last lesson in Unit 1, and this is on solving something called literal equations. So a literal equation is an equation that has two or more variables. So think of it kind of like slope-intercept form, where you had a y and an x. Sometimes we want it to be written in terms of y, sometimes we want to write it in terms of x. So it's going to be taking equations with more than one variable, but we're going to rewrite that solving for one particular variable. So we're going to have to move everything else around in the problem. So we'll start with some basic ones here. So follow along and kind of do these along with me in your notes. So the key is focus on which variable do we want. So in this one, we want to solve for r. So r is what we're going to solve for. Everything else, whether it's a number or a variable, is just something we want to get away from the r. So we want to move everything else away using our inverse operations. If they added it, I subtract. If they multiplied it, I divide. Whatever I need to do, I want to move that term or that piece away from my variable. So in this case, I have d equals rt. I want to get r by itself, so I need to get rid of the t. Well, rt means r times t, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to divide by t, but just like any equation, I have to do the same thing on both sides. That gets rid of the t, so I'm just left with r, and the other side is just d over t, or d divided by t. It's that straightforward. So next one, I want to focus on w. So everything else is just something that I want to move away from w. I want to isolate w and get it by itself. So first thing I take care of is my adding and subtracting. They subtracted y, so I'm going to add y. So I get 6w equals 2z plus y. Then I want to get rid of the 6. Well, they're multiplying, so I'm going to divide. And I get w is equal to 2z plus y over 6. Next one, 5b plus 12c equals 9, and I want to solve for b. So focus on what do I want to isolate? Which variable am I focused on? All the other variables are just things to move away to the other side. So here I'm adding 12, so I'm going to subtract 12c from both sides. So I have 5b is equal to 9 minus 12c. And then I want to get rid of the 5, so I'm going to divide by 5. And b is equal to 9 minus 12c all over 5. So it's not going to be a simple solution, or it's not going to be a very clean answer, but the whole idea is rewriting this whole equation so that it's focused on a different variable this time. Just use the same rules you would if you were just solving for x in a regular problem. There just might be some other variables shifting sides that we just have to kind of move along as we're solving it. So next one, I'm solving for m. All right, so here's m. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of that a by subtracting a away from both sides. So I'm left with 2/3 m. In this case, the a's turn to zeros, so I'm left with r. Now I want to get rid of the 2/3 because I want to be left with just m. Remember, to get rid of a fraction, I multiply by its reciprocal, so 3/2. That gets rid of my 2/3, it cancels out, and I'm left with m is equal to 3/2 times r. All right. Last couple on this page, and then we'll get to some bigger ones. So this time I want to solve for k. So remember, in order to get rid of remember when we have a whole problem in the numerator, so k minus 2, the whole thing is over 5, we need to take care of that 5 first. So I'm going to multiply by 5, and I'm going to multiply the other side times 5. That takes care of that, and I get k minus 2. Over here, 5 times 11j is 55j. Again, I'm still focused on k. I'm trying to get by itself, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And k is equal to 55j plus 2. I'm using all the steps I normally would, same order I would normally tackle things in. I'm just focused on a different variable each time. So, last one on this side, I'm solving for q. So that's the one I want to focus on. Well, they're multiplying by a, so I'm going to divide both sides by a. So I'm left with q minus 8 equals 23 over a. Then I need to get rid of the 8, so I'm going to add 8 to both sides. And I get q is equal to 23 over a plus 8. I'm just kind of undoing each of those layers as I work my way through the problem. All right, back of that page. Now we have some where we have variables on both sides. Again, focus on the variable that we need. Okay? So we're going to get all the terms with the same variable on one side, and then we're going to kind of pull that variable out of it. We're going to factor it out. So here, I want to focus on x. So I'm going to get everything involving the x to one side. I'm going to get everything involving the rest of the problem on the other side. So I'm going to add 2z to both sides. All right, so I'm going to add that 2z. So I have 7x is equal to 4 minus xy plus 2z. Then I want to keep getting those variables on the same side, so I'm going to move everything with the x over to the other side. So I'm going to add xy and add xy. So I have 7x plus xy equals 4 plus 2z. Now, this is where it's going to get a little bit bigger, a little more complicated, so stick with me here. So right now I'm going to focus on this left-hand side, 7x plus xy. If you remember back to previous years, factoring is where both terms have the same factor. They both have the same number or same variable in them. So in this case, I can divide an x out of each of those numbers. So I can divide an x, and I can pull that out front. The 7 and the y are going to stay inside. I divided that out of both of those pieces, and I can pull that out front, and I get 4 plus 2z. Then I want to get x by itself. So right now I'm multiplying by 7 plus y. So I'm going to divide by 7 plus y. And I get x is equal to 4 plus 2z over 7 plus y. Now, that's a lot of steps, and they're not always going to be quite that complicated. We'll only have a couple like that, but it's something that we kind of have to get used to. And the idea is when we're rewriting these equations, we're rewriting it in a way that we can focus on a different variable. So now I could plug in a z, I could plug in a y, I could quickly do a calculation and be able to find the value of x without too much work. Okay? So we're focused on rewriting them in a way that makes our life a little bit easier if we want to focus on finding the value of a particular variable in that problem. All right, next one, we're focused on q. So we want to focus on that q. So I'm going to subtract the qr to both sides. And I'm going to add the 18 to both sides so that the q's are all by themselves. So I have 6q minus qr. And then over here I have t plus 18. Now I have two terms with the q in them, so I'm going to factor the q out of each of those terms. So think of it as I divided them each by q. Well, that would give me 6, and that would give me minus r. Sorry, I crossed out the wrong one there. And then I still have t plus 18 on this side. I want to get q by itself, so I'm going to divide by that 6 minus r, because that's what they're multiplying by. And I get q is equal to t plus 18 over 6 minus r. All right, last two examples, and then you're going to get a chance to work for yourself. Okay? But these are definitely, this back page is definitely the more complicated ones. A lot of your homework tonight are going to be more like the front side of the notes here. So here I want to get rid of everything else, and I just want to focus on x. So when we have pieces that look like they're in fractions like this, one of our strategies are we can cross multiply. So what that means is we're going to take numerator of one times the denominator of the other, numerator of one times the denominator of the other. So n times xy is n xy. 1 times 2x plus y minus 1 is 2x plus y minus 1. I'm going to get everything involving the variable that I want on one side. So I'm going to subtract the 2x to the other side. And I get nxy minus 2x equals y minus 1. Now this is where I have two terms that both have the same variable in them. So I'm going to factor that x out of each of those terms, and I'm left with ny and minus 2. And then my last step is to get x by itself, I'm going to divide by what they're multiplying by. And I get x is equal to y minus 1 over ny minus 2. Now, it's perfectly okay to rewind a little bit, go back, listen to that last example one more time. The more you kind of see it, the more you kind of pick up on the flow of the problem and the steps and process that we use, the easier and easier these will get. So let's try one more. So again, when we have two fractions equal to each other, find your cross products. So 2 times ax plus b equals 1 times 3x plus b. In this case, I want to focus on the x. So I get 2ax plus 2b equals 3x plus b. I'll move all the x's to the left, so I'm going to subtract 3x. I'm going to subtract the 2b to the other side. So I get 2ax minus 3x. Since they don't have the same variables, one has an x but one has an a and an x, I can't combine those together. They're not like terms. But over here I have b minus 2b. Well, 1 minus 2 is negative 1b. Now you're starting to kind of pick up on what we're going to do next. Now we want to factor that x out of those two terms. So I'm going to divide out an x. And I'm left with 2a minus 3 equals negative 1b. And then my last step is to divide to get rid of those other pieces. So I'm going to divide by what they were multiplying by. And I get x equals negative 1b over 2a minus 3. Okay? And again, those are complicated equations even at their final stages. But what we're going to talk about more tomorrow is why would I want to rewrite an equation for a different variable? Well, because it's going to help me solve a problem depending on which variable I want to focus on. Sometimes the equation isn't solved for the one I need, so I need to rewrite it in a way that helps me be able to get to that answer. All right, so now your turn. I want you to try these 6 problems, okay? These are not as complicated as those last 2. It's more like the front page or maybe the top of the back page a little bit where we have to do a little bit of factoring, but they're all problems that you can solve. When you're done, over on the side whiteboard, you will see the answer key is hanging up. You can go over, check your answers, and then you are welcome to start on tonight's homework. Good luck.